Hello everyone. In the previous video, we learned about one common form of irrigation, that is well irrigation. In this video, we will try to cover tank irrigation and canal irrigation along with the different forms of irrigation that is practiced in a country. So let us begin. This is page number 151 from your textbook. Now, what is tank irrigation? So let's understand what is a tank. A tank is generally a hollow area or depression on the ground where rainwater gets collected. So it's basically an empty space, a hole, hollow meaning a hole or an empty space on the ground where rainwater gets collected. Tank can be constructed. You can even construct tank by building an earthen or a masonry wall across a valley type of depression to impound to collect rainwater. So basically we can even make tanks. Some are natural tank with a depression on the surface. Some tanks are artificial or man-made where we can make by constructing an earthen meaning a structure of stonework, masonry meaning a stonework across a valley type of depression, where the depression we can make a structure to collect rainwater. So that is what a tank irrigation is. Now, what are the different requirements for tank irrigation, building tank? First, the topography meaning a relief of depression for collection of water. It is important that you have a relief. If you look into this picture, the relief feature should have a low lying area, a hollow or an empty space to collect rainwater. So that is important. You must have a topography with depression meaning low lying area. Second condition that is required, there should be ample seasonal rainfall to ensure water supply in the tanks. The second is there, you must ensure that there is ample rainfall, seasonal rainfall, so that the water in the tank gets collected. Third, the bedrock should be non-porous to prevent the further percolation of water. So non-porous meaning a type of rock, hard rocks which don't seep in water. So the water should not seep in further down, rather it should be stored in the tanks for further use. So these are the three conditions that are important for the construction of tank. First is we should have a depression, a low lying area. Second is ample seasonal rainfall, and third is we must have non porous rock bed. The rock must be non porous, meaning where water cannot seep in further down, all right, where in fact instead the water has to be collected in the tank. So these are the three conditions which are necessary for the building of tanks. Now, what are the advantages of tank? You must learn few advantages. First, tank conserve rainwater by minimizing surface runoff. So one very important advantage of tank irrigation is that because rainwater is being collected, so this really helps in minimizing surface runoff and causing soil erosion or landslides or floods. So if you collect the rainwater, then definitely the runoff would be less. So that's one important advantage of tank irrigation. Second, they raise the groundwater table of the surrounding area, because tanks are built in areas where the water percolation is prevented. So definitely the water is not being used, rather all the rainwater is being used for irrigation purpose. So what happens to the groundwater table? It keeps on rising because that is not being used. We are just using rainwater. So when we are just using rainwater, the groundwater is not being used at all. So what happens? The water table increases. It becomes high, that which could be used for future purpose. Third, construction of tank is generally low as compared to canal. So in comparison to other forms of irrigation, especially canal irrigation, the construction of tank is comparatively low. Fourth advantage is that in many cases tank as the source of drinking water in large part of rural. In many parts of rural India, you will see that it is tank irrigation which is the main source of drinking water to the rural population. So these are the different advantages of tank. Moving to the next. Disadvantage. What are the disadvantages of tank irrigation? First, since tanks are large open spaces where rainwater is stored, much of the water is lost through evaporation. Similar to well, Again, tank, you would notice that there's no covering to it, so what happens, there is loss of water to evaporation. So that is why in the post monsoon season you would mostly have problem of dry tank, where the water is lost because of evaporation. But in the monsoon season, because it rains, so that is why there would not be much problem, the tank being dry. But in the post monsoon season, because of loss of water, evaporation, and lack of rainfall, the tank would remain dry. Next drawback is that most tanks being shallow get dried up in summer. They are non-perennial. So tank are, they tend to dry up during summer because of evaporation. That is why they become non-perennial. So they're non-perennial source. Non-perennial meaning which do not provide water throughout the year. The third drawback of tank is that they depend on monsoon for water. If monsoon fails, tank irrigation also fails. So tank irrigation is heavily dependent on rainfall, monsoon. So that is why if there's late, arrival of monsoon, then tank irrigation is a big problem. So tank heavily depends on monsoon for water. Next is that since tank irrigation covers large tracts of land which could have otherwise been used for agriculture, since there's large area being used to store rainwater, so rather than storing water, those areas could have been used for agriculture purposes. So it takes up a large space, unlike tube well. Next, tank gets silted. Now, what do you mean by silted? It's given here in textbook. Silt means sand, mud, etc. that is carried by flowing water and is left at the bottom of the tank. So, siltation is very common in tank because you're just directly collecting rainwater. So, it is very important that regular desilting is needed to ensure storage of more water. So, we must ensure that all the weathered material that is brought down by runoff has to be desilted so that the water storage is more. So siltation is a big problem in tank irrigation. And the last drawback being irrigating far off places using tank is difficult and expensive. So only providing water to crops that are near to the construction of tank is easier, but if you have to provide water to crops and plants which are far from where the tank is, that is a difficult and expensive task. All right, now where do you find this type of irrigation? Tank irrigation is very popular in the peninsular region, that is the Deccan Plateau region, especially states like Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh. These are two states where tank irrigation is very popular. That is, if you have to talk about region, it's the Deccan Plateau region. If you have to talk about states, it's Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh. Now, what is the reason behind tank irrigation being popular in Deccan Plateau? This is a very common question asked in your examinations. You must know the reason why tank irrigation is popular in South India, or sometimes they ask you Peninsular India or Deccan Plateau. The first is because of many natural depression that enable the collection of water. The topography in the south, because it's in the peninsular part of a country, so the topography, that is relief which have a lot of depression, low lying area, which really leads, it becomes easier for the collection of rainwater. So that is the first reason why tank irrigation is popular in the Deccan Plateau or your peninsular region. Second is because of the occurrence of seasonal rainfall that can provide water supply. So seasonally also this part of India receives rainfall in the arrival and even in the withdrawal of monsoon. So because of this rainfall being ample, they can really build tank irrigation is popular in the peninsular region. Third, existence of hard rock. So these are all the conditions that are necessary for tank irrigation, which we've learned. So because all these conditions are favorable, hard rock, seasonal rainfall, depression, all these are favorable in the southern part of India or the Deccan Plateau. That is why tank irrigation is popular in states like Tamil Nadu. So try to connect with the word T for tank and T for Tamil Nadu. All right. So these are the three reasons why tank irrigation is popular. Along with that, lack of canal irrigation, because building canal irrigation is an expensive task, and even the topography is uneven, a lot of depression. That is why canal irrigation is not favorable to be constructed in the Deccan Plateau region. So that is why tank is more popular than canal irrigation. Now states, please try to remember Tamil Nadu. You can learn Andhra Pradesh, Telangana. These are the different. Orissa is also there, where tank irrigation is popular. So that is about tank irrigation. Now moving to the second type of irrigation, that is the canal irrigation. Now, what is a canal irrigation? Canal irrigation refers to the supply of water from a river to a far off cultivable land through an artificially constructed path called a canal. So, when you try to extract water from a river by making a path for that water to flow to the cultivable land, that is what is known as canal irrigation. Now, there are two types of canals. One is a perennial canal, from the word itself, perennial meaning which has water in it throughout the year. All right, and the other is non-perennial canal. So let's try to start learn about what are perennial canals. These are canals which have water throughout the year and can irrigate large area. They draw water from the perennial rivers, so definitely that's why they are perennial in nature, because they extract water from rivers which have water in it throughout the year. How do they extract water? By the construction of dams or barrages. Okay, they're more popular in the northern India as rivers are perennial and the land is relatively flat. That is why Indira Gandhi Canal is a very famous canal, longest canal in Rajasthan. Alright, so you might get a question, why canal irrigation is popular in northern India? Because of the rivers being perennial and the land being flat. You need a flat land for canals to be constructed. Alright, so that is what about canal irrigation. Now, advantages. What are the advantages? The following are the advantages of perennial canal irrigation. That is, first, they provide regular supply of water throughout the year. That's why they are termed as perennial. Second, they provide a mode of cheap internal water transport. One is that the it is not as expensive to provide water internally, meaning to nearby areas. So one, because it can cover a larger area, so it becomes cheaper if you have to transport water to the surrounding area. Third, they supply fertile alluvial soil to the irrigated fields and control flood in low-lying river plain, because you are extracting water directly from the rivers, which can contain a lot of fertile alluvium, so that can be provided to the crops, which can facilitate production of crops, okay, which can yield better crops. So moving to the next. Disadvantages. What are the disadvantages of canal irrigation? The first is that supply of excess water renders, meaning provides the land infertile and unsuitable for agriculture in the longer run. It's because the water has been provided, there's no shortage of water, because it's a perennial canal and it's water throughout the year. So because the water is being provided throughout the year, this can make the land infertile because of runoff. Alright. Second, canal construction involves greater construction cost. So you have to it is expensive. That is why it's not popularly used by farmers, because you have to provide a lot of facilities and infrastructure that are required for the construction of canals. Loss of cultivatable land is wasted by means of by just constructing a path. For where water has to be flown, you will be wasting a lot of land which could actually be used for growing crops. So these are the drawbacks of canal irrigation. Now, states, again, UP is a very popular state. You can learn other states as well. Rajasthan, where Indira Gandhi Canal is. So try to remember at least two states where canal irrigation is popularly used, and these are a perennial canal which has water in it throughout the year. So this picture here, the map here, helps us to show the different forms of irrigation. If you look here, tube wells are major forms of irrigation in northern part. If you look into the southern part, tank irrigation is very popular in the Deccan Plateau region. So the green ones, tank irrigation. Alright, canal irrigation popular in areas where all the perennial rivers are, which has water in it throughout the year. Alright, so these are different forms of irrigation and how they are used in different parts of the country. Moving to the next. Non-perennial canal. Now, what are non-perennial canal? From the word itself, they are also known as inundation canal or flood canal. As the name indicates, they're seasonally operational. So, non-perennial meaning which has water in it only when it rains. Alright, which does not have water throughout the year. So that is why they are also known as inundation or flood canal, meaning they will have water in it when it rains. Water is channelized out without construction. So directly, without constructing a dam or a barrage, the water is directly provided to the land. When the river is inundated, meaning flooded, the excess water flows through this canal. They are less useful than the perennial canal. So this is how a perennial canal, non-perennial canal works. If you look into this picture, flood canal during post-monsoon, after monsoon, the water level is less, there's no rainfall, so no water in the canal. When it rains, what happens? The water is, the river, the the height of the river rises, and what happens, it starts overflowing. That is how water is there provided in the canal. So this is why non-perennial canal are also known as floodwater canal. And what are the advantages of canal, non-perennial canal? They're useful in controlling floods. Okay, non-perennial because they don't have water in throughout the year. So when the water is level rises in the river, they can be provided to the cultivable land through canal, cheap to construct and operate. Whereas the disadvantage is that water supply is seasonal, so we cannot really depend on inundation canal or non-perennial canal. There's no control over water supplies. If the water exceeds, you cannot have a controlled flow of water. Whereas in the perennial canal, there's a path, there's a dam or a barrage is constructed, so you can easily control the flow of water. But in non-perennial, you cannot. Right now, here in this part, this is important. Northern part of India is well suited for canal irrigation. You might get a question: why is the northern part of India popular for canal? Because of the wide network of numerous perennial river that can provide water throughout the year. So there are numerous perennial river in the northern part of India which has water in it throughout the year. Similarly, they can provide water to the canal throughout the year. And the second is the topography is flat. It's not uneven, it is flat, so it just becomes easier to construct canal in the northern part. So this is very important. You might get a question why northern India is favorable or suitable for canal irrigation. Now moving to the next. Third, presence of soft soil makes the construction of canals very easy. So three reasons why canal irrigation is popular in North India is because of these three reasons. So please try to remember all three: because of perennial river, because of the topography, and because of the soft soil. Now coming to the last part of this lesson, different methods of irrigation. There are many different methods of irrigation that are practiced in our country. The first is the furrow irrigation. What happens under this method? Under this method, water is made to flow through narrow channel made between the rows of cultivated crops. This method ensures even supply of water all over the field. It is possible only in those areas where plenty of water is available. So you need plenty of water to practice this irrigation. So what happens? In between the crops, there's a path or road that is created from where the water is flown and distributed to different crops, and it is only possible in areas where there's ample supply of water. Second is the sprinkler. From the word itself, sprinkle or spray, it's also known as spray. Under this method, what's happening, the field is irrigated using a spray gun or sprinklers attached to the other. I'm sure you've seen this in tea gardens where there's a spray like a fountain that is released and it is distributed or that surrounding area in the form of a spray. Initial cost involved in this method is a sprinkler is more as compared to furrow. So initially it's quite expensive, but however it is more efficient in distributing water evenly. And the third form is drip irrigation. It is the most advanced. These are all your modern forms of irrigation. Sprinkler, drip are your modern. So what is it? It's the most efficient method. Water is provided directly to the roots of the plants by means of thin pipes buried under the furrows of the plant. That is why they are known as drip. So if you look in, there's a pipe. From this, the water directly go to the roots. So there's no wastage of water. That's one important advantage of drip, is that it reduces the loss of water by evaporation, unlike your tank, your well, which is open. So there was lot of evaporation, siltation taking place, isn't it? But in drip irrigation, there's very less loss of water because the water is supplied directly to the roots of the plants. And second advantage, it enables the farmer to customize water supply to each plant as per its requirement. So they can provide water to whichever plant they feel requires more water. So that is one way to enable farmers to customize water supply according to their need. All right, so these are the different methods of irrigation that is practiced. Now we'll quickly review what we've covered so far. So this is how a canal irrigation looks like. All right, constructed like a path. Okay, this is a canal irrigation and how water is distributed to the field. Canal irrigation could be perennial, non-perennial. Perennial meaning which has water throughout the year. Non-perennial is also known as inundation or floodwater canal. This is your furrow for irrigation, okay, where in between the crops there is a row from where water distributed, and this type of irrigation is mostly popular in areas which has plenty supply of water. This is a sprinkler irrigation, mostly in tea gardens or any other plantation crop area where one single crop is grown on a larger scale, less wastage, and is one of the modern form of irrigation. And this is what is known as a drip. This is a strawberry farm, and you see how from the pipe there's a sublet from where this goes directly to the roots of the plants. So this will provide a very modern form of irrigation and less wastage of water. This is a drip irrigation, as you can see, directly attached to the roots of the plants. You would see, isn't it? This directly attached to the roots, so there's less wastage of water, and farmers can customize their water requirement as well. So that is about the different forms of irrigation. So we've learned about tank irrigation, we learned about canal irrigation, and the different forms of irrigation practiced in our country. Thank you.